Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're reading from the Adi Lila chapter 7, verses 112 onwards. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamam Nande Shri Gurum Deen Tarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat. Everything about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is spiritual, including his body, opulence, and paraphernalia. Mayavad philosophy, however, covering his spiritual opulence, advocates the theory of impersonalism. Purport: it is stated in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidanand Vigraha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has a spiritual body which is full of knowledge, eternity, and bliss. In this material world, everyone's body is just the opposite, temporary, full of ignorance and full of misery. Therefore, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is sometimes described as Nirakar, this is to indicate that he does not have a material body like us. Mayavad philosophers do not know how it is that Supreme Personality of Godhead is formless. The Supreme Lord does not have a form like ours, but has a spiritual form. Not knowing this, Mayavadi philosophers simply advocate the one-sided view that the Supreme Godhead or Brahman is formless, Nirakar. In this connection, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur offers many quotes from the Vedic literature. If one accepts the real or direct meaning of these Vedic statements, one can understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has a spiritual body, Satchid Anand Vigraha. In the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 5.1.1, it is said, Purnam Adha Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. This indicates that the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is spiritual, for even though he expands in many ways, he remains the same. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Matta Sarvam Paravartate. I am the origin of everything emanates from me. Mayavadi philosophers materialistically think that if the Supreme Truth expands himself in everything, he must lose his original form. Thus they think that there cannot be any form other than the expansive, gigantic body of the Lord. But the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad confirms Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. Although he expands in many ways, he keeps his original personality. His original spiritual body remains as it is. Similarly, elsewhere it is stated, Vichitra Shakti Purusha Purana. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original person Purush, has multifarious energies, and the Shweta Shva Avatar Upanishad declares, Savriksha Kala Kritibhi Paro Anyo Yasmat Prapanchah Parivartate Ayam Dharmavaham Papunudam Bhagesham. He is the origin of material creation, and it is due to him only that everything changes. He is the protector of religion and annihilator of all sinful activities. He is the master of all opulences. Vedaham etam purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamsaha parastat. Now I understand the Supreme, this is 6.6 from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Now I understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be the greatest of the great. He is effulgent like the sun. He is beyond this material world. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.8, Patim Patinam Paramam Parastat. He is the master of all masters, the superior of all superiors. Shvetashvatara Avatar Upanishad 6.7, Mahan Prabhur Vai Purusha. He is the supreme master and supreme person. From the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.12, Parasaya Shakti Vividhaiva Shruyate. We can understand his opulences in different ways. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.8. Similarly, in the Rig Veda it is stated, Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surya. Vishnu is the supreme, and those who are actually learned think only of his lotus feet. In the Prashna Upanishad 6.3 it is said, Sa iksham chakre, he glanced over the material creation in the Aitreya Upanishad 1.1.1 to 2. It is said, Sa Akshata, he glanced over the material creation, and Sa Imal Lokan Asrijata, he created this entire material world. Thus, many verses can be quoted from the Upanishads and Vedas which prove that the Supreme Godhead is not impersonal. In the Katha Upanishad 2.2.13, it is also said, Nityo Nityanam Chetanash Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kaman. He is a supreme, eternally conscious person who maintains all other living entities. From all these Vedic references, one can understand that this absolute truth is a person and that no one can equal or excel him. Although there are many foolish Mayavadi philosophers who think they are even greater than Krishna, Krishna is a Samardhva. No one is equal to or above him. As stated in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.19, Apani Pado Javano Grahita, this verse describes the absolute truth as having no legs or hands. Although this is an impersonal description, it does not mean that Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead has no form. He has a spiritual form that is distinct from the forms of matter. In this verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu clarifies this distinction. Verse 113, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of spiritual potencies, therefore his body, name, fame, and an entourage are all spiritual. The Mayavadi philosopher, due to ignorance, says that these are all merely transformations of the material mode of goodness. Purport: in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has classified his energies in two distinct divisions, namely Prakrita and Aprakrita, or Paraprakriti and Aparaprakriti. In the Vishnu Puran, the same distinction is made. The Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand these two Prakritis or natures, material and spiritual, but one who is actually intelligent can understand them. Considering the many varieties and activities in the material nature, why should the Mayavadi philosophers deny the spiritual varieties of the spiritual world? The Bhagavatam 10.2.32 says, Ye anye arvindaksha vimukta maninas tvai ast bhavad avishuddha buddhaya. The intelligence of those who think themselves liberated but have no information of the spiritual world is not yet clear. In this verse, the term avishuddha buddhaya refers to unclean intelligence. Due to unclean intelligence or a poor fund of knowledge, the Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand the distinction between material and spiritual varieties. Therefore, they cannot even think of spiritual varieties because they take it for granted that all variety is material. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore explains in this verse that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead or the Absolute Truth, has a spiritual body that is distinct from the material bodies, and thus his name, abode, entourage and qualities are all spiritual. The material mode of goodness has nothing to do with spiritual varieties. Mayavadi philosophers, however, cannot clearly understand spiritual varieties. Therefore, they imagine a negation of the material world to be the spiritual world. The material qualities of goodness, passion and ignorance cannot act in the spiritual world, which is therefore called Nirguna, as clearly indicated in Bhagavad Gita. Traya Gunaya Vishaya Veda Nistraya Gunayo Bhavarjuna. The material world is a manifestation of the three modes of material nature, but one has to become free from these modes to come to the spiritual world where their influence is completely absent. Now Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will disassociate Lord Shiva from Mayavad philosophy in the following verse. Verse 114. Shankaracharya, who is an incarnation of Lord Shiva, is faultless because he is a servant carrying out the orders of the Lord, but those who follow his Mayavadi philosophy are doomed. They will lose all their advancement in the spiritual knowledge. Purport: Mayavadi philosophers are very proud of exhibiting their Vedanta knowledge through grammatical jugglery, but in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna certifies that they are Maya Paharita Jnana, bereft of real knowledge due to Maya. Maya has two potencies with which to execute her two functions, the Prakshepatmika Shakti, the power to throw the living entity into the ocean of material existence, and Avarnatmika Shakti, the power to cover the knowledge of the living entity. The function of the Avarnatmika Shakti is explained in the Bhagavad Gita by the word Maya ya Parita Jnanaha. Why the Devi Maya or illusory energy of Krishna takes away the knowledge of the Mayavadi philosophers is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita by the use of the words Asuram Bhavam Ashrita, which refers to a person who does not agree to the existence of the Lord. The Mayavadis who are not in agreement with the existence of the Lord can be classified in two groups, exemplified by the impersonate Shankarites of Varanasi and the Buddhists of Sarnath. Both groups are Mayavadis, and Krishna takes away their knowledge due to their atheistic philosophies. Neither group agrees to accept the existence of a personal God. The Buddhist philosophers clearly deny both the soul and God, and although the Shankarites do not openly deny God, they say that Absolute is Nirakar or formless. Thus both the Buddhists and Shankarites are Avishuddha Buddhaya or imperfect and unclean in their knowledge and intelligence. The most prominent Mayavadi scholar Sadanand Yogindra has written the book Vedanta Sara, in which he expounds the philosophy of Shankaracharya, and all the followers of Shankar's philosophy attribute great importance to his statements. In this Vedanta Sara, Sadanand Yogindra defines Brahman as Satchidananda combined with knowledge and without duality, and he defines ignorance Jada as knowledge distinct from that of Sat and Asat. So Jada is the ignorance which is defined as knowledge distinct from that of Sat and Asat. This is almost inconceivable, but it is product of the three material qualities. Thus he considers anything other than pure knowledge to be material. The center of ignorance is considered to be something all-pervading and sometimes individual. Thus, according to his opinion, both the all-pervading Vishnu and the individual living entities are products of ignorance. In simple language, it is the opinion of Sadanand Yogindra that since everything is Nirakar formless, the conception of Vishnu and the conception of the individual soul are both products of ignorance. He also explains that the Vishuddha Sattva conception of the Vaishnavas is nothing but Pradhan, or the chief principle of creation. He maintains that when all-pervading knowledge is contaminated by Vishuddha Sattva, which consists of transformation of the quality of goodness, there arises the conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the omnipotent, omniscient, supreme ruler, the super soul and the cause of all causes, the supreme Ishwar, etc. According to Sadanand Yogindra, because Ishwar, the Supreme Lord, is the reservoir of all ignorance, he may be called Sarvagyan or omniscient, but one who denies the existence of the omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead is far more than Ishwar or the Lord. His conclusion, therefore, is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishwar, is a transformation of material ignorance, and that the living entity Jiva is covered by ignorance. Thus he describes both collective and individual existence in darkness. According to Mayavadi philosophers, the Vaishnav's conception of the Lord as a Supreme Personality of Godhead and that of Jiva or individual soul as his eternal servant is a manifestation of ignorance. If we accept the judgment of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, however, the Mayavadis are to be considered Maya Parita Jnana or bereft of all knowledge, because they do not recognize the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or they claim that his existence is a product of the material conception Maya. These are characteristics of asuras or demons. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his discourse with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, Jivere Nistar Lagi Sutra Kaila Vyasa Mayavadi Bhashya Sunile Hai Sarvanasha. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 6.169. Vyasadeva composed the Vedanta Sutra to deliver the conditioned souls from this material world, but Shankaracharya, by presenting the Vedanta Sutra in his own way, has clearly done a great disservice to human society. For one who follows his Mayavad philosophy is doomed. In the Vedanta Sutra, devotional service is clearly indicated, but the Mayavadi philosophers refuse to accept the spiritual body of the Supreme Absolute Person and refuse to accept the living entity as an individual existence separate from the Supreme Lord. Thus, they have created atheistic havoc all over the world. For such a conclusion is against the very natural nature of the transcendental process of pure devotional service. The Mayavad philosophers' unrealizable ambition is to become one with the Supreme Lord through denying the existence of the personality of Godhead, results in a most calamitous misrepresentation of spiritual knowledge, and one who follows this philosophy is doomed to remain perpetually in this material world. Therefore, the Mayavadis are called Abhishuddha Buddhaya, or unclean in knowledge. Because they are unclean in knowledge, all their austerities and penances end in frustration. Thus, although they may be honored at first as a very learned scholars, ultimately they descend to physical activities of politics, social work, etc. Instead of becoming one with the Supreme Lord, they become one with these material activities. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.2.32. Arohya kachrena param padam tattah patanti adho anadrita yushmad angrayah. It actually, the Mayavadi philosophers very strictly follow the austerities and penances of spiritual life, and in this way are elevated to the impersonal Brahman platform. But due to their negligence of the lotus feet of the Lord, they again fall down to material existence. Verse 115, one who considers the transcendental body of Lord Vishnu to be made of material nature is the greatest offender at the lotus feet of the Lord. There is no greater blasphemy against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami explains that the variegated personal feature of the Absolute Truth is the Vishnu Tattva, and that the material energy which creates the cosmic manifestation is the energy of Lord Vishnu. The creative force is merely the energy of the Lord, but the foolish conclude that because the Lord has distributed himself in impersonal form, he has no separate existence. The impersonal Brahman, however, cannot possess energies, nor do the Vedic literature state that Maya or illusory energy is covered by another Maya. There are hundreds and thousands of references, however, to Vishnu Maya Prasharya, Parasya Shakti, or the energy of Lord Vishnu in Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Krishna refers to Maya, my energy. Maya is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not that he is covered by Maya, therefore Lord Vishnu cannot be a product of the material energy. In the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, it is said, Janmadi asya yatha, indicating that material energy is also an emanation of the Supreme Brahman. How then could he be covered by the material energy? If that was possible, material energy would be greater than that of Supreme Brahman. Even these simple arguments, which cannot be understood by the Mayavadi philosophers, and therefore the term Maya Aparita Jnana, which is applied to them in the Bhagavad Gita, is extremely appropriate. Anyone who thinks that Lord Vishnu is a product of the material energy as explained by Sadananda Yogindra, should immediately be understood to be insane, for his knowledge has been stolen by the illusory energy. Lord Vishnu cannot be replaced by the category of demigods. Those who are actually bewildered by the Mayavad philosophy and are still in the darkness of ignorance consider Lord Vishnu to be demigod. In defiance of the Rig Veda mantra Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam, Vishnu is always in a superior position. The mantra is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Mata Parartram Dadyat. There is no truth superior to Lord Krishna or Vishnu. Thus only those whose knowledge has been bewildered consider Lord Vishnu to be demigod, and therefore suggest that one may worship either Lord Vishnu, the goddess Kali, Durga, or whomever one likes and achieve the same result. This is ignorant conclusion and is not accepted in Bhagavad Gita 9.5, which says Yanti Deva Vetan Yanti Yagyo Apimam. The worshippers of the demigods will be promoted to the respective planets of the demigods, but the devotees of the Supreme Lord will go back to Godhead. Lord Krishna explains very clearly in Bhagavad Gita 7.14 that his material energy is very difficult to overcome. Devi hi Esha Gunmai Mama Maya Durataya. Maya's influence is so strong that even learned scholars and spiritualists are also covered by Maya and think themselves to be as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, however, to free oneself from the influence of Maya, one must surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna also stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, Mam evaye prapadyante mayam etam taranti de. It is to be concluded, therefore, that Lord Vishnu does not belong to this material creation but to the spiritual world. To misconceive Lord Vishnu to have a material body or to equate him with the demigods is the most offensive blasphemy against Lord Vishnu and offenders against the lotus feet of Lord. And offenders against the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu cannot advance in spiritual knowledge. They are called Maya Parita Jnana for those whose knowledge has been stolen by the influence of illusion. One who thinks that there is a difference between Lord Vishnu's body and his soul dwells in the darkest regions of ignorance. There is no difference between Lord Vishnu's body and Vishnu's soul, for they are those who think there is difference between Lord Vishnu's body and his soul dwells in the darkest region of ignorance. There is no difference between Lord Vishnu's body and Vishnu's soul. They are Advaya Jnana, one knowledge. In this world there is difference between material body and material and spiritual body, soul. Sorry, not spiritual body, spiritual soul. But in the spiritual world, everything is spiritual and there are no such differences. The greatest offense of the Mayavadi philosophers is to consider Lord Vishnu and living entities to be one and the same. In this connection, the Padma Puran states, Arche Vishnu. The greatest offense of the Mayavadi philosopher is to consider Lord Vishnu and living entities to be one and same. In this connection, Padma Puran states, Archya Vishnu, Shila Dhira Gurusu, Naramatir Vaishnave Jati Buddhi. Yasya va naraki saha. One who considers the Archmurti, the worshipful deity of Vishnu, to be stone, the spiritual master to be not a human being, and a Vaishnava to belong to a particular caste or creed is possessed of hellish intelligence. One who follows such conclusions is doomed. So we'll continue our reading from here onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.